I'm sure glad that you joined me today and taking the time and to listen to this video, because this video is going to discuss how to parent. Now, even when I say that, how to parent, you can read a lot of books, study, and by all means pray, but really learning how to parent is in the go. My wife Becky and I, we had 6 children, and the first one that came, what do you do? Here's this bundle of life that's so small and so fragile and is so dependent upon you. The survival of a child is dependent upon the parent when they're born. And so when we're given this great responsibility to raise children, how do we do this? This is what this is about. This video is it isn't the complete study, but it's going to help, because with me today I have 2 parents that are raising children, and I'd like to introduce them now. Kent and Alyssa Simmons. And also Eric and Kathy Whitinger. Now, as they are applauding themselves, and we should really, because I think they're wonderful parents, and they have young children. Kent, what are the ages of your children?
We have 2 daughters, 7 years old and 10 years old.
And Kathy, what about your kids?
We have a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son.
So we see that they're in the age group from 4 to 10. And what do you think, and this question could be to any of you, what do you think is, when a baby's born, what do you do? What was the first thing that you began to do? One of the hardest things that happen when a baby's born, your firstborn?
Well, that's tough because they were so different. Jael, we ended up having to go to the hospital, and Auden was at home. So Jael was trying to get her oxygen levels high enough. So we stayed at the hospital for a while. That was the first thing I remember. And Auden, first thing I remember was just put him on Kathy's chest and having some tummy time. That was the first thing.
So that kind of sticks out in your memory about what happens. Were you nervous? How did you emotionally feel when this baby, especially the first one was a girl, she's born, can you describe even your emotional place, or?
I don't know. I mean, I was almost more making sure Kathy was okay. And then, because once we saw Jael come to life in a sense, she cried for just a second, then she was just wide awake, looking around, looking at her new surroundings. But then make sure Kathy was doing okay. Because that was our, in a sense, nightmare experience. So we did not want to go to the hospital. That was
Right.
not going to happen. And so I just want to make sure she was okay, Jael was okay, so it didn't matter.
So once they were okay, then it was fine.
Yeah, I felt good.
And Kathy, what about yourself?
For me, it was a mix of being excited to meet her, but then also nervous because that's when rubber hits the road and you're having to really, okay, this is it. You can't necessarily just think about it anymore. You have to really figure out how to be a parent. And
So it is definitely something that changes your life.
yes, and you can read so many books, you can talk to so many people, but until it's actually you in those shoes, having to now parent, it gets real, real fast.
So, Kent, what do you think of, is parenting that something that just comes natural? Or how did you even know what to do?
Well, we definitely had some great examples of what to do, and we had both our girls at home too. So we had Becky to help us. Like, okay, what's the next step here? Once they're out, and you kind of come down from that high, then it's like, oh, we should probably get them in a diaper and get some clothes on them, and I think it comes natural in that you don't have another choice. You're in it, you know.
It's almost an area that's just forced. It's here.
Yeah.
Here, this baby is.
Yeah.
Now you have to respond.
And like Kat was saying, like you can read up all you want and feel like you have the knowledge, but that kind of goes out the window. You know, you're just faced with trying to keep him alive for a night. You know, what's his first night going to be like?
What would
So-
you say that, Alyssa, was the hardest when the baby's born, first born? How did you feel concerning that? And like Ken said, you know, you have to provide physically for this baby. And how did you feel when you saw, you know, her there in your arms?
Well, kind of like Kat says, you're excited to finally get to meet this child that's been moving around inside you and all of that stuff. And I think my first concern was, well, I need to nurse this baby then.
Yeah.
Because I want it to not starve. I think that's the first instinct to like, which is our natural instinct, that we need shelter and we need food.
Right.
And love and all those other things. But that was my, especially with Tessa, was that, which is our 10-year-old, our firstborn, was to get her fed.
Did I'll ask both couples, were your babies easy to go to sleep, or the sleep patterns and this kind of thing begins to happen with newborns? How did you respond to that, Kathy? What did you do?
Oh, it was not easy.
It was.
Jael didn't get enough food for about the first month. We didn't, you know, that's one of the hard parts. Having the first one, you have no idea how much food they're getting, and so we really struggled for the first month. I don't think we slept.
Yeah, because she has
than-
wet diapers, she had poopy diapers, but they weren't enough.
She
And
wasn't gaining weight.
She wasn't gaining. She
She was
lost.
cranky. She didn't sleep.
She lost like 10 ounces in that first couple weeks, I think. So she was either crying or whiny. She didn't sleep more than an hour or two at once.
So would you say that's kind of a normal for a baby or a
I
newborn?
don't think so.
No, you don't want your baby to lose weight, especially at the get-go. That can get dangerous.
What about you, Alyssa? Kent, and your firstborn baby, new, you're trying to feed the baby, clothe the baby, keep her comfortable. What was her pattern? What was the way she responded to your parenting?
Well, once we got like nursing figured out and how to do that, all the learning curve that comes with that, she really did great. She would nurse all the time, and she slept a lot, and she slept with us so that I didn't have to get up and go take her to a whole different room. And there's lots of debate on that kind of thing, but that's what worked for us and for her for that time. And so I can't remember, she lost a little bit right at the beginning, but then she just gained.
Would you say, can you put a timeline from the time the baby's born to when they began to adapt, as it were, in your life, in your family, to where they're sleeping well, they eat regularly, and they're really in a rhythm almost in your family? Do you have a timeline? Because I know that Aaron Caddy mentioned maybe the first month it was that you never slept, and you know, the baby is really demanding from you. The baby's demanding, and I know this. What I'm getting at is parenting. Almost you respond to the demands of the baby, because all babies are different. And I think as people watching this video, you have to realize that your baby is going to act differently than other babies. And sometimes I would say panic. Did you ever feel panicked? Or can you kind of express it like, oh yeah, so
Still
explain
panicked.
something of your, explain something of your panic.
Well, I think going back to timeline, maybe like the first year, anywhere within that range, I feel like you're, especially with your first child, there's, you know, plenty of sleepless nights and trying to get him in a routine. But I would say by a year old, right? It just is different. There's such
It's
a
all a
range,
blur.
but
What was
I-
your expression there, Alyssa? Was it?
It's all a blur. Those first. It really is hard to remember specifics like that. Like,
yeah.
you know, you just do it.
Well-
Till
Well, I
then.
remember more specifics with JL because the first month was brutal. Maybe first 2 months, but once we got the feeding under control with supplement and breastfeeding, we got into a rhythm of things to where, through experience with talking to other people of what they did, of how they get their kid to kind of sleep more through the night instead of waking up a lot, is where we would wake them up and feed them right away and then play with them so they go naturally to sleep without the bottle. And that seemed to help a lot at night and help them sleep longer to where they're not needing a bottle to go to sleep. They kind of go to sleep on their own. And I think that kind of happened 4 months, 5 months, where that kind of rhythm started happening. And you do feel comfortable. At least I did with JL after that first couple months. Once she started sleeping and she started gaining weight at a good rate, yeah, you get comfortable. We get into rhythm of life
You
where
get rhythm.
yeah, she's not fitting into us and we're not just fitting into her schedule. We kind of get a balance where you have a whole new schedule. There's no going back to, well, she's going to fit into our old lifestyle. That's not happening.
No, that's
So-
that's not going to happen.
So yeah, you find a new rhythm of life with one kid.
Okay, so let me just ask both of you couples that the first beginning of the baby's life timeline varies even to where they begin to fit into the rhythm of living. What advice would you give then to a couple and that have their firstborn baby? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, before they had the baby, I would ask them if they have a good support network of people or some people that they can lean on and talk to, because that's really, I think, very important, to have people you can talk to about things of what's going on. We were blessed enough to have my mom, Becky, as a certified awesome midwife. So when things happen, we can just talk to her. And when things feel crazy, we have someone who has seen almost everything, and so you feel very comfortable when things aren't going your way. So that would be my first thing, is like have a support group.
Now, that is very good advice, but the support group, what kind of people would you invite in? Apparently you wouldn't ask a single person, never had a baby. What kind of person, like you said, you had somebody that had very good knowledge of this. Is there any particular characteristic of a support group that you would want to invite into that circle? That would be in raising the baby at the beginning.
Well, someone who's had kids, someone who's gone through it at least once or twice, just so that they've had the actual experience and not just read about it, because there's definitely a difference between the two. I mean, even the doctor that you go to before, right? If you're going to go to the doctor, you have what are those people called? Pediatricians.
And Kathy,
You're-
what,
Your pediatrician.
Kathy, what would you say, advice, other than a support group, is there any?
I think for us, and this kind of goes back to what I learned in teaching, is that all humans want routine. All humans want to know what's coming next. So having a structure, and what Eric was saying about the rhythm of life, I think establishing routines is super important, because you as a parent know what's coming, and then that child learns what's coming next. So just for example, a bedtime routine. like having, you know, feeding time a certain time and book time or bath time, whatever you determine as a family. I think it's super helpful to then do that on a daily basis at the same time, because it's just establishing that sense of security for everybody involved. And I think once we did that, like Eric said, within 4 or 5 months, you just get into the rhythm of life and you're all kind of feeling
So you actually
better about things.
saw the baby in coming into a routine that you established even at that beginning
Oh, yeah.
stage.
Yep.
Well, that's very good.
'Cause it's
So
going to be
let's
harder to establish.
Mhm.
If you just
What-
decide, well, you're 5 now, let's start establishing routines, it's a lot more difficult. And I think even for us, that's when I felt that sense of, well, she's always been here. Like, you get that sense of, I don't remember life prior to kids. And I think that helped establish that.
How long did that seem to?
It didn't take long. But I think establishing those routines helped, because that's your new way of life, like Eric was saying. We can't go back to that old way, and so sometimes it's hard to remember the old way.
Right, right.
So.
That's very good. Now, listen, what would you say to a couple just had a baby? These great examples. What would you say?
They took really good answers already.
Actually, you got
They,
to have to
they
talk
took
a
the good
little bit
answers
louder.
already. No, I think part of it too is to trust your instincts, because God knows what child He gave you, and everything in you to be that child's parent is already there. And to trust that you were supposed to be the parent of this child, and that you know what to do. And sometimes it takes some trial and error of trying different things that may or may not work, but to know that God didn't just give you somebody else's kid, or that somebody else would be better for them. And I think that's really hard. That can be your whole parenting experience. And sometimes we question, somebody else would be better to parent this child, but God gave those specific kids to you for a reason, and that you really do know what's best for them, and you can listen to those other opinions, and those are really important and valuable and really helpful, but sometimes they don't work, and you have to find your own way with them, or with a specific child if you have multiple. But a certain way you did one thing with the first one does not work with the second one. So just trusting your instincts, and that it's okay to do it a different way, or it's okay to do it a different way than anybody you've talked to.
That's very good. Did you have to deal with criticism from others then? Because I believe, as Eric says, support group, but then sometimes a support group will tell you this is how you do it. But your instinct, as you said, begins to say something different. Did that ever happen in your raising a child thus far?
I think it's more self-inflicted criticism than anything else.
Oh, very good.
May not be something that's told to you by someone, but maybe something you read, a different approach, and then you think, oh, that must be the better way. Then you sort of get down on yourself that you're not doing it that way, And so, like you're saying, you're trusting that it's different for each kid, and that's okay. And I think trust is huge. Yeah, that even like the pregnancy itself, like there's a natural progression to it all. Like the woman's made to carry the baby, to give birth to the baby, to nurse the baby, and then the baby itself is God designed the baby to sort of function the way it does. All the different systems begin to work, and there are many times early on, for me at least, that you're just freaking out, like every little noise and every little
Silence.
blemish on the skin or something. You're like, what is that?
I thought he was allergic to flowers.
We got flowers, after Alyssa gave birth, and Tessa started sneezing.
Like,
Why
get
is
him out of the
she
house.
sneezing?
No more flowers.
Get to the ER quickly. But I remember her Tessa that first night, she was kind of coughing up like the fluid, amniotic fluid, I think it was what it was. And you're just freaking out. What is this? So there's like Alyssa was saying, the trust factor that baby's alive and it's gonna function as it needs to function, and we feed it and care for it. But God set it all up.
That's
It's
beautiful.
just working the way it needs to work.
So have you seen a change then from the firstborn to the next as far as your panic mode?
I think, yeah, with the second one, you've had your first run already, so not your first rodeo anymore.
Yeah.
But there's still moments, because it's a different baby, and there's different oddities that happen,
Well, this has been very, very good, because I would say that is probably some of the best advice that I've heard of giving to parents. That number one, you have a support group, and that support group can tell you what things, well, that's just normal, or they encourage you, or somewhat talk you off the ledge, And then, of course, the rhythm, that you have to establish a rhythm. I'd like to visit each one of those ideas and advice that you give, but I'd kind of like to go on a little bit further. But you have the rhythm, because this is a problem, I think, that even adults, we don't have a rhythm. We just kind of respond to each given thing, but that's another whole discussion. And then following your instincts, both with Ken and Alyssa, that you mentioned that's another area that I believe people have lost their confidence in their own understanding. And no one can raise your child like you can. And so discovering that from the very beginning. But let's go a little bit further.